Hello everyone, welcome to New Community Connecting You to Resources. My name is Rodney Brutton and I serve as the host for today's program, and I'm also the Director of Workforce Development for New Community Corporation Workforce Development Center. Today we're joined by Ms. Aziza Johnson, our admissions representative and student recruiter, and we'll learn more about Aziza's role, her background, and how it ties into today's work. So welcome, Aziza.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So tell us a little bit about your background, some of the work you've done that led you to your role here at New Community Workforce Development Center.
Sure. So I started with the Newark Youth One Stop, Mayor's Office of Employment and Training. When I first started, I was working for the SYEP program, the Summer Youth Program, and I was just a monitor. And I worked my way up to working with the WIOA team, where I was then certified as a WIOA youth counselor.
Great. So in your role with the City of Newark and the Youth One Stop and the WIOA counselor, what primarily were you tasked with in terms of recruiting students and Newark residents for respective programs?
Sure. So I was in charge of certification, making sure they had all their documents, making sure that they were actually ready to go into school or into a job or into a training program. I had to make sure that any barriers that they had, we either were able to service or we were able as an agency to help them with.
Great. So you were connecting some of the students to other resources within the city if they needed supportive services to get through whatever challenges they may have. When you talk of outreach and recruitment, how important was it to work with high schools and community groups to sort of get young people engaged in the programs that you were offering with the city?
Well, that was our major pull. The high schools, because we serviced the youth between 14 to 24 in the WIOA program, and then the same for the SYP program. That was our major pull.
And you were working with high schools and community groups in terms of recruitment, right? So when you look at sort of the recruiting role, and as it ties into your role here at New Community, what are some of the things you look for as a good candidate for either, again, in your role with the city, but moving forward, your role with New Community now?
Somebody that's eager, somebody that's actually ready to go into a training program. If they can keep up with their appointments, if they can bring in all their documents, if they can show that they're dedicated, if they can also follow up with me as I follow up with them, then that's definitely something that I look at. I also look at their living situation. Of course, you can't go and start a program if you have 5 kids at home and you don't have child care,
sure,
or you don't have transportation. You live all the way across town. So those are some of the things that we look at when it comes to the actual the recruiting aspect.
Great. Yep. Which is key, right? Because when you look at the work we do, and looking for the job seeker that's in essence ready to work, right? They're just one step away. We need to be able to connect them to different resources that they may need to get into the training program. When you think of our training programs at New Community and some of the areas that we recruit students for, what are the requirements to get into our programs?
So first, you have to be a U.S. citizen. You don't necessarily have to be a Newark resident, which opens it up to a lot more opportunities to students. We require you to have certain documents, such as birth certificate, social security card, and your high school diploma for the programs. For the programs, right? And that's similar to what you were asked and required to gather when you were working with the city in terms of some of the supporting documents for those in order to be certified. So when you think of our programs in New Community, we offer a culinary arts program, a construction building trades program that focuses on carpentry, electrical and plumbing, and HVAC as a trade. We have a clinical medical assistant program, patient care technician program, and a wonderful program automotive technician program sponsored by Ford. So Aziza, when we talk about our post-secondary programs and in your efforts to recruit students, what are some of the things you promote about our workforce programs as you recruit and then look to enroll students? One thing that I've learned a while ago, because I've worked with you in the past with your academic enrichment program when I was working with the city, is that in New Community is a different school in itself. New Community actually cares about the well-being of the student, which I can't really say for most other schools that I've dealt with in the past. As far as being concerned about their well-being. We really are nurturing. Sure. So we really do follow up, and we consider it as a family. Correct, and absolutely. And you look at our programs and you think of the goal of all of what we do is not only work to admit
students into our programs, but more importantly, work with students to get jobs on the back end.
And to keep them in the program as
Correct.
well.
And how important is that? How important is student retention and keeping them in the program, in your experience?
It's the most important thing, because if they come and they start the program and they don't finish, then there's no outcome. Then they might as well have started from point A again. But we're trying to get them from point A all the way to point Z. So that's I believe is one of the most important things.
Absolutely.
Completion. And employment.
Yep. Which is the next sort of topic I wanted to get your thoughts on in your previous role again with the city and even your expanded role at New Community. When you talk of employment and employer engagement, and you work with the Summer Youth Employment Program, working with a lot of employers within city government and outside city government in the private sector, what are employers looking for when they're recruiting candidates and job seekers?
Well, I also, after I worked with WIOA, the Summer Youth Program, I moved and I worked as a job developer. So establishing those type of relationships and actually finding out what the employer is looking for is key, because the jobs are changing every day. So if we're not training for what they're looking for now, then it's a lost cause.
Yeah.
So having that relationship, being able to correspond and going back and forth, that's really important. That's the key.
Great. And with the timing of today's program, and in essence what we're doing at New Community is we're gearing up for a next session of students to enroll in our programs in January. January 29th is the start date. So tell us a little about what you've been doing to recruit students for the January 29th session.
Okay, so we've been reaching out. It's not just myself. We have a team. Like I said, New Community, we work as a team, and I really love that. When I came in, I didn't feel like I was pinpointed out, although I am the recruiter. We have reached out to community organizations. I've reached out to several high schools and gotten a lot of good feedback. Like, a lot of people don't really know what New Community does. So getting the word out, getting our name out there has been one of my major tasks, and the feedback that I've been getting is really, really good.
So this session that's starting the 29th, we welcome those who are interested to contact New Community Workforce Development Center. Our phone number is 973-639-5604 or 973-824-6484 to learn more about the classes that are starting the 29th. So again, just share with the audience the classes that we're recruiting for.
Okay, so we have our we have our clinical medical assistant program. We have our patient care technician program that we're recruiting for, our automotive technician program, culinary arts and building trades that we're recruiting for.
Right.
And we do have open enrollment. So just because you missed the January 29th start date, the classes are set in modules, so that you will be able to start on the next start date for that next module.
Correct. Which the modules are every 4 to 5 weeks.
Right.
In between starting
Depending
in the
on the
module.
program.
Yep. And again, for our audience, what are the requirements to enroll in the program?
Well, you have to be at least 18 years or older for the program. For those programs, you have to have your high school diploma, you have to have your ID, social security card, and birth certificate. And you also may have to take an entrance exam upon your orientation.
Great. And just talk to us a little about the instructional staff. That you referenced the work we do as a team. What's your level of involvement with the instructors and the teachers and other staff at New Community?
Well, we have to be in communication on a consistent basis, because if something changes, that's something definitely that I need to know about. If you want to add something into the curriculum and somebody's calling and asking about a specific topic, then I want to be knowledgeable and be able to answer those questions. So we do really have a good relationship. We correspond on a daily basis.
And then in terms of the packaging of enrolling students in our program, what's your relationship and how closely do you work with the financial aid office?
It's my right hand. Ms. Hughes, I work very closely with her, even when it comes to my recruiting style, because you come through me and then you immediately go to her.
Yep.
So we work very close together.
And that's a very good point. If you sort of walk through the customer flow of enrollment into our programs, as Ms. Johnson referenced, you'd have to complete an application, bring in the supporting documents, then begin the financial aid process, which is led by Ms. Alicia Hughes, the Director of Financial Aid. So, Aziza, as we talk about the work we do and moving forward, what's your vision with regards to New Community Workforce Development Center and its place here as a post-secondary accredited school? What's your vision, long-term vision for us as a school?
I just want to see it grow. It's a lot of great opportunities. A lot of people don't know about it. We do offer financial aid. We are accredited school, so those are key pointers that I would expect students to look for when they're looking to go back to school. And we have a lot of great programs. So I'm just looking forward to seeing the school grow.
Yep. And the wealth of potential for us to grow. And then an area of growth for us, and an area that we need to put an even greater emphasis on, is recruiting high school kids
Right.
who are graduating,
Right.
let's say this coming June. So tell us a little bit about how closely you're looking to work with high school students.
So I've already started. I've not been with New Community that long, but the feedback that I've gotten from the different counselors, the vice principals, their feedback is that they're interested in going out there and recruiting their students now. So a lot of them know that that college may not be for that student, so then they're referring them to me now. So I do intend on going out to different high schools, giving presentations, giving them more information about who we are and what we do.
Great, which is key, because that's an untapped market for us.
Right.
And as you reference all of the wonderful things we have at New Community, and if people don't know about it,
How
then
can they do
how can they
anything
do
about it?
anything? So again, just to share with our audience, New Community Workforce Development Center, is recruiting candidates for our next session, which is scheduled to start January 29th. Our school is located at 274 South Orange Avenue in Newark, New Jersey. For those who are interested, they can contact New Community Workforce Center directly at area 973-639-5604 or 973-824-6484 to learn more about our programs. We also encourage you to visit our website at www.newcommunity.org to learn more about New Community Workforce Development Center and all of New Community programs as a whole. So thank you, and we look forward to you signing up for our programs. Welcome back. We're now joined by Mr. Richard Cammarieri, the Director of Special Projects for New Community Corporation. Richard and I will talk a little bit about New Community Corporation as a whole, as an organization, and talk about an upcoming gala. So Richard, welcome.
Thank you, Rodney. Good to be back.
Great. Thank you. So Richard, why don't you share with our audience a little of the history of New Community as we celebrate our 50th year of being in service. Give us a little history of how New Community started and where we are now.
It's impossible to give a little history now. I mean, to understand the history of New Community, you have to understand the history of Newark, basically,
Sure.
in terms of the racial and economic dynamics. Can't understand that without understanding the history of this whole country.
Sure.
The same issues. So, since this isn't a mini-series, I'll try to keep it thumbnail. But essentially, New Community Corporation began through the efforts of a group of people who had been working throughout the 50s and 60s. Around a church called Queen of Angels, which doesn't exist anymore. People have to remember the 60s obviously were a time of great ferment. The civil rights movement was moving from the south to the north. You had issues of the Vietnam War, the counterculture, anti-war movement, beginnings of a women's rights thing. A lot of the progressive movements that we see today,
Sure.
the last 50 years, really started in the 60s. There was a group of people who worked around Queen of Angels Church, which was the epicenter of a lot of activism. People don't realize Queen of Angels was actually in the 30s, was a kind of foreshadow what New Community would do in terms of social services, daycare, food pantries. But you had a group of people like Joe Cheney Field, Willie Wright, Tim Still, Bob Kirpin, Alma Bateman, who worked at Queen of Angels and who were dealing with all these issues, civil rights, labor issues, social services.
Sure.
In '67, when the Newark Rebellion hit, and like many of us, I call it rebellion, not riot, because there was a political context to it that you really can't ignore. To just call it a riot kind of dismisses it as some sort of, violent but trivial act. And again, people need to remember '67 was the result of years of disinvestment from our city that
Sure.
was racially targeted. But after the rebellion, those 5 days in July, there were two people had to figure out, what do we do now? It's almost like Dr. King's final book, where do we go from here? So there were two directions people in Newark took. One was political. We had to transform the political system in our city to make sure that black people are represented.
Sure.
But black people went from about 30-40% population of Newark in 1959 to almost over 60% by 1967.
Wow.
And yet, there was no representation. You had one black councilman who was really a part of the white establishment.
Sure.
probably 85% of the police department was black.
Sure.
It
Was white.
was white, yes.
Yeah.
So there was no representation, no enfranchisement, and that needed to be changed. So people said, we got to get a black mayor elected, with Ken Gibson being the candidate. On the other hand, to complement that, nothing, they were complementary.
Not siloed, yes.
Right. People said, how do we change the community? How do we change the material conditions of our community so that it is better? That's where the people who worked at Queen of Angels, like I said, the gentleman I said, a young priest named William Linder, who had got to Queen of Angels back 62, the pastor there, Thomas Carey. This is a very vibrant group, and in fact, to show that how important they were, when Dr. King came to Newark a week before he was murdered in Memphis, he stayed at Queen of Angels Church.
Wow.
He even designated then Father Linder, who's Monsignor Linder now, to be the treasurer for the Poor People's March.
Wow.
Which still occurred even after he was killed in Memphis. So it was a very vibrant spot and place for activism in Newark.
So when you talk of Monsignor Linder,
Yes.
As part of that core group of Newark residents and community leaders that were really engaged, what was Monsignor's role in addition to being a very key person? What was his role in developing and identifying what these key social issues were and are in the catchment area of New Community?
From from speaking with the people who were there, some of these men and women, and there were women involved. Sometimes we lose sight of the women who were involved both
Sure.
in the civil rights movement and Alma Bateman was a founding board member of New Community. But Father Linder played an important role in terms of bringing his experience, some of his engineering experience in terms of what New Community would become. And he had a key role in terms of contacts for funding. So it was from everything you would read, it was a real teamwork kind of dynamic that was involved. There were also alliances with suburban churches, which was very important to New Community's origin in terms of resources, whereby some of these suburban parishes raised money to contribute to what New Community was trying to accomplish. And Father Linder was at the core of a lot of this fundraising, reaching out to the government sector, to private industry, that sort of thing.
Sure. So what were the 5 key core policy or social service issues New Community was founded on and continues its work?
Well, at the time, maybe some of our viewers might not be old enough to remember, Queen of Angels was surrounded by 3 major public housing projects: Hayes Homes, Stella Wright, and Scudder Homes. Thousands of public housing tenants who were served by Queen of Angels. So they basically did what we call focus groups now. And the key things were better housing and daycare centers. Now, there was more than that, of course, because the key issues that New Community grew to encompass were housing, healthcare, education, employment, public safety. But that's how it started, with those 2 issues. And thus, Babyland Family Services became the first project the New Community created. And then the housing, to show you the challenge with housing, the first housing wasn't built until 1975, even though we were incorporated in '68. But it was just a matter, assembling land, because the vision for New Community, and they did a lot of work on this. They went to national visits to other sites, was grand. It was big. So in order to accomplish and assimilate the land that they needed, which is now New Community's footprint, it took some time. But they finally got it done. '75, the ball got rolling, and it hasn't stopped since in terms of the housing development, the physical development.
Sure. So, and if you look at workforce development or economic development, even back in New Community's sort of original days, and again, fast forward to where we are now, how important was economic or workforce development per se then, and I guess even now?
Oh, well, economics was at the core, really at the core of everything, because people needed an economic foundation to empower themselves. The whole thinking was that adequate income would lead to better housing,
Sure.
better social services, better health care, that sort of thing. So that's always been at the core.
Less
of this.
crime.
Less crime. Although I wouldn't put a causative relations there, but there is a corollary there
Sure.
in terms of the crime and poverty. But that was, and the key thing here was also that New Community wanted to manage its own housing, which meant it was going to do its own hiring. A lot of these groups would farm out their management to outside agencies that way, but then they didn't know who they were hiring. So that's how New Community became an employer also.
Correct.
Economics was always at the core. And they even trained residents in the beginning. They required residents to go through almost a year's worth of training
Wow.
before they were allowed to move into the housing as to exactly what the systems were in the housing, how the plumbing worked, how the
Wow.
electricity worked, their responsibilities
Sure,
as tenants,
sure.
and their rights as
Sure.
residents. So it was a very, very organic and comprehensive approach that New Community took in the early days and still takes today.
So as we come upon New Community celebrating 50 years of being in service, how have we been able to sustain ourselves organizationally for 50 years?
Well, that's the question for all these nonprofit community-based organizations. And New Community is one of the larger, what are called CDCs, Community Development Corporations. Although Newark is a little unusual in that we have a core group of them that have been around 40 plus years, 50 plus years. It's a variety of things. The housing generates money through the voucher system, the federal government subsidization, Section 8 housing. In fact, all of our housing is rental, Section 8 housing. 95% of our residents are not low income, they're extremely low income
Sure.
in terms of federal formula. So that generates funding to keep our housing up. We have funding from private sources. We have fees that we charge for our program. So
Sure.
it's like most groups, it's a mix of funding sources.
So actually, the New Community is coming up, as I referenced, our 50th anniversary. We're having a celebration Saturday, March 3rd at the Meadowlands Hilton to honor Monsignor Linder and 50 years of service and 5 decades of great work and service. Tell us, as we wrap up this segment, Richard, a little about, again, Monsignor's vision, and as we all are now living out and carrying out Monsignor's vision to provide services to those in need. What's the importance of that?
Well, going back to the beginning, the vision, which again was created collaboratively among people across the community with Monsignor Linder, Father Linder then, along with all these other people I mentioned, was as simple and as complicated as to do one thing, and that was to create a new community, thus the name. That's not an easy thing. There are a lot of variables to it, a lot of things to approach, but that was it. And New Community managed over the years to start rolling out housing and healthcare through the nursing home, through the nursing programs and workforce development,
Sure.
economic stability through our credit union,
Sure.
the workforce development program, youth programming, education through our early learning childhood. So we built one step upon another in terms of all the needs that really intersect. When I mentioned housing, healthcare, employment, education, all those things are connected. You can't talk about anything in Newark or any city without hitting onto one or more of those things. New Community has managed to, through its programming, to touch them all.
Correct.
And in fact, it also has become an economic engine because New Community employs people. Almost 600 people are employed
Wow.
by New Community, with maybe 70% of them Newark residents, maybe 80% people of color. So all these things are critical to what it does and who it is, its vision and its programming.
Yep, and it's wonderful that we're now sort of gatekeepers and stewards of Monsignor Linder's work. So we welcome those who are interested in attending our 50th anniversary gala to contact New Community Corporation at Eric 973-623-2800. We also welcome you to visit our website at www.newcommunity.org to learn more about our event that's coming up March 3rd at the Meadowlands Hilton. So we appreciate everyone's interest and time in learning more about New Community Workforce Development Center, as well as New Community Corporation, its history and its origin. And we welcome you to contact the agency to learn more about all of the great work we do. Thank you.